Now we go into our wide receiver position, and I'm going to kind of funnel ourselves into this, and I'm going to go with a wide receiver who's actually been pretty good over the last couple of games. In fact, he's been actually underrated this season. I'm going to go Zay Jones from the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he's up against the Detroit Lions. Funny enough, in the last two games, he's actually been targeted 24 times with a whopping 19 receptions as a result of that. He's not the Robin to Christian Kirk's Batman. He's Nightwing, the 1B in that Jacksonville wide receiver room. Now, I think many of us need to kind of give Jacksonville a big fat apology this season after they paid Zay Jones through the roof. But not only has he out-earned that, he's earned every single penny with a 37.8% target share, hauling in 11 grabs and 145 yards last week against my Baltimore Ravens. Jones is now wide receiver 29 in fantasy with 22.7% target share. Now, if you're going to get someone in an offense that's getting that amount of target share, that is someone that desperately needs to be in your team. And this week they get the team who is second worst against wide receivers. Now, if you weren't fortunate enough to get Christian Kirk in your lineup, this is the guy that you need to kind of get, the 1B to Christian Kirk's 1A. And I think this week he'll be fantastic. He's an absolute smash play. I think this week Christian Kirk will get much of the attention from Jeff Okudah, the number one cornerback from Detroit. That will leave the likes of Zay Jones, Marvin Jones, kind of get most of the work. And we've seen in the last couple of weeks, Trevor Lawrence is not adverse to throwing the ball to Zay Jones's way. So I think this week, Zay Jones is going to be an absolute smash play pick of the week. Che, who have you got?
Well, I'm going to go deep in my bag here. I'm going to go to a guy who I don't know why I have a soft spot for. And I don't know, maybe I have a soft spot for the afflicted, but he's an elite wide receiver on his day. And he's a tough runner. And I think he's had a tough rap this year. However, he had an awakening last week. And I think this is going to be his week to come out. And that's Elijah Moore, the wide receiver of the New York Jets. Again, we're going with a Jets player. This time on my end, he's a slot receiver. We don't have much of a sample size because last week he got 2 targets for 66 yards and a touchdown on that 22-yard big play from Mike White. Now, since Mike White has come, if you remember, you mentioned, Uchenna, when we did our piece on the Jets, that the Jets seem to thrive, or their wide receivers, they're stacked at the receiver, stacked at the running back position. Now, they seem to thrive on a pure pocket passer. And where they had Zach Wilson, that team suffered as far as their wide receivers, in that Zach Wilson could not make his reads. And so that's where Garrett Wilson, who clearly is their number one wide receiver, seemed to get the most of the favor as their big Ohio State wide receiver. I believe he came from Ohio State.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's a Buckeye. However, when you think about it, Garrett Wilson had such a big game last week that where they're going against the 22nd ranked defense versus the slot, Minnesota Vikings are going to play a 2-deep high shell, and they're going to try their best to nullify Garrett Wilson with the likes of Harrison Smith et al. At the safety position, helping out both in the run game and also bracketing in double coverage Garrett Wilson. And I think that's where Elijah Moore is going to go to work. Now, why do I say this, even though we've got such a small sample size of both him and Mike White? Well, all we need to do is to go back to week 9, where Mike White got injured versus the Colts. He was 7 of 11 in passing attempts, 7 completions to 11 attempts. And if you look, Elijah Moore got 7 targets. He was 60% of the offensive playing time was Elijah Moore. In the first quarter, he had a big play in that game against the Colts. And in the third as well, he also got included in that game from Johnson, their other backup quarterback, where Mike White got injured. This is last season, he got 19 more yards. So really, we look at what they do with Mike White, in fact that the playbook is so much more open, more than it was with Zach Wilson. And when you look at Elijah Moore's scouting report coming into the league, because remember, he's only a sophomore. He said his scouting report says he had very good hands, he can win on the inside and out, and also he had good footwork, and he understands soft spots in zones and how to throttle down. And he's a tough, competitive player. Now, I think that they're going to use Elijah Moore a lot, where he did that last week with his big play in the zone, against zone coverages. And I think that Minnesota are going to play a lot of zone coverages whilst they also complement that with the 2 deep shell with a sample size of what they've seen of Mike White and daring to throw it either in the slot or beat them with the run game now that Breece Hall isn't there. I think that's what they have to do with such a porous defense. Now, when you look at their defensive sets, Ed Donatel, their defensive coordinator, has a base coverage of a cover 3, but then he likes to blitz on first down with a cover 1. And the types of man alignment that he has, he tries to force the wide receivers inside with help. So really, we're going to find that Elijah Moore is going to be up against a lot of linebackers and a lot of safeties. Harrison Smith is going to be up against all of these safeties as well as the free safety as well. So it's going to be a mixture of the linebackers, the Michael Will, and the free safeties over the top. And so because of that, it's going to be the linebacker dropping into that hole in that coverage, that cover 1 coverage on third down opportunities. This is where I'm saying that I think Elijah Moore is going to thrive in the middle of the field. And so because of that, I'm going with Elijah Moore as my wide receiver for this week.
Very, very interesting take there from Elijah Moore, who has actually suffered this season. I do feel for him. I think we've kind of outlined it previously in our assertions with this Jets offense that they're much better than what they are. And I think last week they definitely showed that against Chicago. It's actually pretty funny that you kind of mentioned the Vikings defense and zone coverage. As per PFF, they actually have zone coverage 33.5% of the time this season. So again, someone like Elijah Moore, who is an expert wide receiver, don't be fooled by these last weeks and the fact that Zach Wilson has been thrown to him and his obvious drops. He's a very good wide receiver and he's definitely accomplished within the zone. Now, we all know that this defense is risk averse and they don't like giving up the big play. And when you don't give up the big play, what do? You give up the middle part of the field. And the slot receivers have actually been really good this year. I mean, Jacoby Myers last week had himself a day, and I fully expect Elijah Moore to do the same. So he's definitely a great pick this year, especially if you're hurting at wide receiver. He's someone that will be on the waiver wire in the majority of leagues. And I just think he's someone that you could definitely slot in, pick up, and then definitely hope for the best. So yeah, it's a very, very good pick.